Somewhere in a quiet office in Innsbruck, Austria, a statistician named Achim Zeilies has just done something that millions of football fans around the world wish they could do themselves. Which is to say, he has, with a fairly straight face, told the planet exactly who is going to win the World Cup. And he did it not by reading tea leaves or sacrificing a goat to the football gods, but by building a machine learning algorithm so thorough it makes your average pub pundit look like he is just guessing numbers out of a hat, which, let's be honest, he probably is. Here is the thing about predicting a World Cup winner that nobody wants to admit out loud. It is an almost comically difficult problem dressed up as a simple one. Because on the surface, it looks like you just need to know which teams are good, but underneath that surface lies an avalanche of variables so chaotic that even the smartest people in sports science have spent decades getting it wrong in increasingly elaborate ways. And yet, every 4 years, someone new walks in convinced they have finally cracked the code. And this year, that someone is a team of statisticians from across Europe, pooling their brainpower from the University of Innsbruck, TU Dortmund, TU Munich, and Norway's Molde University College, which sounds less like a sports prediction unit and more like the guest list for the most intense academic conference imaginable. So how exactly does a group of statisticians go about predicting the outcome of a tournament involving dozens of teams, hundreds of players, and approximately 1 billion variables that can swing on a single deflected shot in the 89th minute? Well, they did not just throw darts at a wall covered in flags. They built something genuinely elaborate, starting with 8 years of match data from every national team they could get their hands on, which is already an impressive haul before you even get to the clever part, because next they layered in what they call a prospective strength estimate for each team, essentially borrowing the collective wisdom, or perhaps the collective desperation, of international bookmakers, whose odds tend to bake in all sorts of subtle knowledge that raw statistics alone might miss. Things like momentum, morale, and the general vibe of a squad heading into a tournament. And then, just when you think the model has enough to work with, it goes one step further and zooms all the way into the individual players themselves, pulling in performance ratings from both club and international football, and even factoring in each player's value on the international transfer market. Because apparently nothing says this man is good at football quite like how much money rival clubs would be willing to spend to steal him away, which is either a wonderfully elegant proxy for talent or a slightly depressing reminder that football, at its core, runs on the same economic logic as everything else in modern life. All of this data, the historical results, the bookmaker wisdom, the player ratings, the transfer fees, gets funneled into something called a random forest algorithm, which, despite sounding like the setting of a fairy tale, is actually a machine learning technique that essentially builds hundreds, sometimes thousands of decision trees, each one asking its own slightly different questions about the data, and then lets them all vote on the outcome, a sort of democratic council of digital oracles arguing amongst themselves before reaching a consensus. And once that consensus is formed, the researchers do not stop there either, because they then run 100,000 full simulations of the entire tournament, essentially replaying the World Cup 100,000 times inside a computer to see which team comes out on top most often, which is either the most thorough thing a person has ever done for sports or the most elaborate way anyone has ever avoided just watching the actual matches. So after all that data, all those trees, all those simulated tournaments, who does the algorithm think is going to lift the trophy? According to Zeilies and his team, the most probable winner this year is Spain, with England trailing just behind as the next most likely champion. And if that sounds like a confident, tidy conclusion, Zeilies himself is quick to remind everyone that confidence is not the same thing as certainty. Because as he put it himself, all of these forecasts are probabilistic, clearly below 100%, and therefore by no means guaranteed, which is statistician speak for, please do not bet your house on this. And honestly, given what just happened a few days before this prediction even came out, That warning could not be more timely, because Spain, the very team this algorithm has crowned as favorite, somehow managed to play out a goalless draw against Cape Verde, a result that probably made several thousand statisticians spit out their coffee in unison. And if you are sitting there thinking this is the first time someone has tried to outmath the unpredictability of football, you would be wrong. Because this particular research group has actually been at this exact game since 2018. And their track record is, shall we say, a charming mix of triumph and humility. Because back in 2019, they correctly called the United States as champions of the Women's World Cup, which is genuinely impressive. But their predictions of Spain and Argentina as winners of the 2023 women's and 2022 men's tournaments respectively did not exactly pan out, proving once again that football has an almost spiteful sense of humor when it comes to anyone who claims to have figured it out completely. And they are far from alone in this long and slightly absurd tradition of humans trying to mathematically tame the chaos of football. Because back in 2014, a German mathematician named Joachim Clement built his own statistical model and correctly predicted Germany's victory that year, and then went on to correctly call the winners of the next 3 tournaments after that. An almost suspiciously good streak, though even Clement's brilliance gets gently upstaged by perhaps the most famous football oracle in modern history, who was not a mathematician at all, but an octopus, also German as it happens, who correctly predicted the outcome of the 2010 World Cup final after an already uncanny run of correct calls during the 2008 European Championships. A psychic streak that sadly came to an end only because the octopus passed away just 3 months after his moment of global fame. Which, depending on how cynical you are feeling today, either proves that nature occasionally outperforms machine learning, or simply that the octopus got out at exactly the right time. So where does all of this leave us? The ordinary fans sitting on our sofas with strong opinions and 0 random forest algorithms at our disposal. Honestly, probably exactly where football has always left us. Somewhere between data and drama. Between the cold comfort of probability and the warm chaos of 90 minutes where literally anything can happen. Because even the most sophisticated model in the world, built from 8 years of data and 100,000 simulated futures, still has to admit that it cannot promise you a single certain outcome. And maybe that uncertainty is not a flaw in the system at all. Maybe it is actually the entire point of why we keep watching in the first place.